Hey everyone, welcome back to the Printasaurus. I've got some instructions here. I have my Sovol SV08 up here on my desk, and today we are upgrading it to Mainline Klipper, something that a lot of you have asked about when I released my last Sovol SV08 video. So today's the day. We're going to jump right into it. We're going to make this as easy as possible, and it will be a straightforward install. So let's do it. There are prerequisites that you will need. Print your instructions. It's very important. I'm using Rappetor's instructions. They are fantastic. Everything well thought out, easy to read. Didn't have any issues following them. I did option one, which is what I'm going to walk you through today. I felt that was the easiest of the three methods, so that's what we went with. A couple tools you'll need. You'll need a 2mm Allen key. This is the one that came with the SV08, and that's to remove the bottom panel of your printer. You'll need a Phillips head screwdriver, and that is going to be for the eMMC. You also need to purchase a eMMC adapter to use the method that I'm using. This was like 15 bucks. And then you will need to jump on Amazon and purchase a ST-Link. Now this is going to be used to flash the tool head and the motherboard later in the instructions. This also was about 15-20 bucks. So all in all, probably about $25, $30 I would give yourself and prerequisite materials you need to purchase. All the software that you will need to download is free. You'll need PuTTY, you'll need WinSCP if you're on a Windows machine. If you are on a Mac or a Linux machine, you can pretty much do everything in Terminal. You will need a Bellina Etcher. They have a Mac version and a Windows version of that. That will be used to actually flash that eMMC. So that's all you need to get going. I also recommend a laptop if you have one, and that's because with the ST-Link, it's going to be plugged into the printer. This is as long as we got for cable to attach to the pens, and it's kind of hard to stretch this to your desktop. Much easier to plug into a laptop and do the firmware upgrade there. So that's it. So we're going to get into it. I'm going to start with the instructions, walk you through what you need to do, and we'll get this thing installed. Give yourself about an hour, hour and a half. I think that would be a good estimate, probably closer to 1.5. All right, so let's do it. Okay, so instructions, we print them out, read through them. I know you guys are gonna follow this video, and I hope this video is extremely helpful and makes this as easy as possible to where you don't really need to read these. But read through them. It's always good to get comfortable with what you're going to do, and the easiest way to do that is just read through the instructions so you can kind of follow along with me as I go through the process. And there's no surprises there. In the instructions, we're gonna reference them a lot because there's a lot of command lines and things that you can copy straight over to your terminal or PuTTY to do these installs. So I will mention that from time to time in the instructions. Before we get started, fire up your printer. Go into the GUI on a web browser, go down to your machine tab and hit the little box that allows you to highlight all of your configs and then download those. What that does is that's creating a backup. It's very important you back up everything as we go about this process, and we're going to reference those backup files later on in the video. We need to pull out some device serial numbers from there for our printer config. We're going to be using our USB eMMC emulator. Say that 6 times fast and see if you don't get tongue-tied. So we're going to use that, and in order to use that, we need to actually pull our eMMC off of our printer. So the easiest way to do that is just pull the printer on its back, and then I'll show you a close-up here of where that eMMC is located. You'll need there's 2 Phillips head screws that you'll remove, and then you can pull that off. Once you have that eMMC pulled off, if you look real closely above the pinout here, you can see a small drawing of the eMMC, and that shows you the orientation. So basically, if the USB portion is sticking up and your pins are down here, long part of the eMMC just points down and plug in. It will not work if you have it backwards. So pay attention to that. And then that is step one of that process. All right, for step two, we're going to flash that eMMC. So again, we have our instructions in front of us, and I will be glancing down to reference them. So before you get started, you need to go to the GitHub for the CB1, Big Tree Text CB1. And what you're going to do there is you're going to download the image or kernel that we're going to use to apply or flash to our eMMC. Make sure you download the minimal kernel that is listed in here. The version numbers may be different at this point, but the instructions still line up good for this process. So download the minimal kernel. We do not need the large kernel. And then make sure you make note of where you download it to, download folder or whatever is fine. And then what we need to do is we need to do our first software install. So that's going to be Balena Etcher. And what that does is that flashes the eMMC. So it will recognize this as a USB storage device, and you will point to that in Balena Etcher, and then you will point to your minimal kernel, and then you hit flash, and that will upload that kernel to the eMMC. Once you do that, you can eject your USB, plug it back in, and then it should show up as a USB boot device. So that's what we're looking for there for a successful step two. Step three, step one. So if you reference your instructions, we have to copy a file over to that boot device that we just created. So simply drag and drop, download that file, and then drag and drop it to the directory listed in the instructions. You can get to that on the GitHub. There's a link to it in the instructions if you're viewing them online. Make it real easy to do it that way. And then once you've done that, we want to make a backup of the boot environment text that is on that eMMC boot drive. And that's so we have it in case we screw something up, because we're actually going to copy and paste and remove a section of text in that file. So in your instructions, step four, we're going to replace what is listed there. So copy, it's a boot logo equals false, and then it ends with overlays. So copy that whole section of text you see, and we're going to paste that, replacing what's in the boot environment text that is above the hash marks and dashes. So everything above that is going to get replaced, and then we'll save that file. And that takes care of the boot environment text file. Next, we're going to do our Wi-Fi settings. So for that, it's going to be your system CFG, so your system config file. And in my case, I copied that off, and then I had to rename it to a text file. You may have to do the same in order to edit it. So just change that to a TXT, and then make your changes and change it back to a CFG. But when you're in there, when you're in that system config, just scroll down till you see your Wi-Fi settings. So you'll see a SSID, and then enter your Wi-Fi name and then password, and then save that file, and then we are done. So once you've done that and you have those credentials entered, we're ready to eject that USB boot device, and then we can pull off the eMMC and put that right back in our printer. And you're going to do that following the same steps that I showed you on how to remove it. So put this thing on its back again. If you haven't already done so, I flipped mine back over, but put it back on its back, and when you're looking at it, orientation, you want the longer part of the eMMC pointing down if you're doing it this way. So this guy will flip back like this, and then make sure the eMMC is pointing down, and you'll be good to go. So leave the aluminum panel off on the bottom, because we will still need to get in there when we do our ST connect. But that pretty much finishes up step three. And then we're ready to move on to step four, which is the installs. That's the fun stuff. So we're moving on to that next. Step four, we're actually going to move into installing Mainline Klipper. So we're going to have to SSH back into our printer. So turn your printer back on, putty, terminal, whatever you're using there to get into your printer, go ahead and SSH into it. And then we're going to run through the process of installing Cowie, Klipper, Moonraker, Crow's Nest, Klipper screen, everything that's going to make this turn into a functional printer again using Mainline Klipper. So step one, we're going to use the instructions heavily for this section because we can copy and paste these commands. So I'm going to run through which ones to run. Didn't have any problems with any of these commands, so we can just run through this section altogether. So step one is a update to the OS. So run the command that's listed there, and I'll show you on-screen examples through this whole process. And then once that's done, we can do our git install. And once we have that installed, we can clone Kaya. And Kaya is going to allow us to run a really easy to use script to do our Klipper install, Klipper screen, Crow's Nest, and everything else. It makes it a very easy process. So once that's pulled down, we can run the Kaya script, and that's going to pull up a GUI where we will select our install options. So option one will be install, and then the next up will be a screen that will actually show you the different installs that you can do. So one should be Klipper, two Moonraker, and so on. So we're going to install these in order, and we're going to do Klipper first, and that's going to take a bit of time. And once that's completed, you can go back in and install Moonraker. And then you're going to install Mainsail. And before you do the last one, Crow's Nest, go ahead and install Klipper screen. And that way you have those files available if you do have an HDMI screen you're going to use or display later on, or if you have one already. Do that install and then Crow's Nest. And really what that does, it eliminates one extra reboot in this process. So follow along there, and then last we're going to do Crow's Nest, and then it will reboot. And then once it reboots, we will SSH back into our printer, and we will finish our installs. So we're going to do our input shaping, which is numpy, and then we're going to do our Moonraker time lapse if you want the time lapse ability still with your printer. Today's video sponsor is PCBWay. PCBWay.com is a great option if you are looking to prototype. Maybe you need to mass produce something. Maybe you don't have time to print something. Maybe you don't have time to machine something. Maybe you don't have the materials on hand. PCBWay.com is a great option. So jump on the website. You can go to their CNC services, upload whatever drawings, schematics you have, get a quote quickly, and get that machined for you. Same with 3D printing. Click on the 3D printing tab. They offer a number of different 3D printing types, different materials. You can select infill, colors, anything you really need to do to get your prototype or mass-produced part printed for you and over to you. Easy to use service, good customer service, PCBWay.com. So we've got everything installed, and this thing is pretty much ready to go. We do have another process we have to do with our ST-Link, but we're getting real close to being ready to start configuring the printer. And in order to do that, we need to pull down some files. So we are now on to step 5, which, as I mentioned, is actually configuring the printer, Klipper, and its add-ons. So in our instructions, go out and grab a few files from the GitHub. You will need to copy over probe pressure Python script and Z offset calibration script, and we're going to put those in a Klipper directory, and the easiest way to do that would be WinSCP or through your terminal doing a file transfer. So you'll place those in the Clippy extras directory, and once you have that done, we're ready to actually grab printer configuration files and upload those onto the printer. Now those you can do from the GUI, so navigate to your IP address for your printer, and then once you're in there, go down to the machine tab, and then from there we can actually upload each file, create directories, and so on. So we're going to grab off of the GitHub. We need the options folder and all of its contents. We need the printer config, Sovol macros, saved variables, and crow's nest config. So grab all of those and then upload those onto your new Klipper install on your printer. Again, machine tab, and then that already puts you in the config folder, and then drop everything in there. Once you have that done, what we need to do is open our backup folder of what we backed up at the beginning of all this. And in there, you want to go into your printer config. And the reason why is we need to grab the device serial numbers for your main board and your tool head. And that's so Klipper can appropriately communicate with your motherboard and your tool head. So look for the dev serial number by ID, and it should be TTY, AM, so on is the default Sovol device name. So you'll take that and copy it into our new config that is loaded on the Sovol SV08, and you will replace those device lines. You'll have 2 of them listed, and pay attention to which one you do, because if you get them backwards, bad things can happen. You could have your tool head turn on and automatically start heating up, and the bed turn on, and you know, a lot of strange things can happen, and it's not ideal. So I recommend doing one at a time and copy and paste them in. And then once you have that done, we can do a firmware restart on our printer. And when it comes up, your printer should be communicating. You shouldn't have a red box displayed saying, hey, I can't communicate, or you know, whatever the error is. That should be cleared now, and you should have a printer that is functioning properly. You could home it, you could do a quad level gantry. Everything for the most part would be in place. If you wanted to heat the bed up, you could, tool head as well. But you should at this point be able to control your printer, and it should be looking like a Klipper based printer. So step 6 is more involved, and that's where the laptop is going to come into play, and that is where ST-Link and these cables and pinouts will come into play. So we need to go out to st.com and download their software. The link for that is in the instructions, so reference those for that part, and that's in step 1 of step 6. So once you have that downloaded, you can take this and plug it into the USB, and you will open that ST-Link software, and it should see this device over on the right side. You should see it come up with the serial number and all that good stuff, and that's how you know that you have a properly working setup. And that's why I also recommended getting a more genuine ST-Link. Some of the generic ones may not communicate properly, and you may have some issues. Again, link to this in the description down below, so you have it. And the reason why we are doing, or why we will be doing this firmware flash, is so you have your tool head and motherboard set up appropriately for input shaping. As is, we installed the input shaper stuff, but it will not function properly until we do this firmware update to the tool head and the main board. So it talks about downloading that software and plugging this in and making sure that you can see it. Make sure your printer is off for this portion. You don't need to power it on, because with this plugged into the USB, when we do the pinouts, that's what's going to power the eMMC and then the tool head. So step 2, printer's off and everything. There are 4 pins that we're going to connect on our ST-Link. They are the 3.3 volt, there's an IO, CK, and then a ground pin. I have these labeled. I've taken from the instructions an on-screen example here of how to plug these in. So you can start with either the main board or the tool head to do these. But in my case, I started with the motherboard. So you'll insert your ST-Link into the printer again, or I'm sorry, into your laptop. Again, the printer will stay off. You will open your STM32 programmer, which is the ST-Link software, and you will press connect. At that point, with it connected to your printer, using those pins in the example I showed of how to connect it, you will do a read all. And what that's doing is that's reading everything that is on that chip. And then you can save it. And when we save it, that is what is creating your backup. And name them mainboard and then name them toolhead. Now, if you get this part messed up or anything, the firmware is on the GitHub, on Rappetor's GitHub. So you do have it if you need it, but it is very good practice to go through this backup procedure just to make sure that you have everything you need without any issues. So you'll do this for both the toolhead and the main board. And then once you're done with those backups, you're ready to flash catapult, is what we're going to do next, which is step 7. Okay, for step 7, we're going to disconnect this from our printer for the time being, and we will have to plug it in. But what we need to do next is we need to flash a catapult bootloader. And so in order to do that, you're going to power on your printer and you're going to SSH back into it. And once you do, you're going to run the command in step 1 of step 7. And that will clone a repository for Catapult and bring it down. And then we will do a serial install. And once that's done, we are going to do a menu config. So follow along on the on-screen examples and make sure you have all your parameters the same as what we have listed there. And basically what you're doing is you're pointing it to an STM32, which is what we are basically flashing this into using our ST-Link. So you will make those changes and make that menu config, and then you will press Q, which quits and saves, and then we will make the configuration file, which will create the catapult.bin. And then what we need to do with WinSCP or your terminal is pull that file off of the printer and save it onto your laptop or whatever you're using to connect to your ST-Link. Because we will upload that to this, which will then flash it to the printer. So once you've got that file off of your printer, go ahead and turn your printer back off. Remember, when we're using the ST-Link, we want our printer off because it is being powered by this plugged into the computer. So go ahead and plug your ST-Link back in, hook back up to your pinouts. You can do either toolhead or mainboard first. It's going to be the same flash on both. So start with whatever one you want to there, and plug those pins back in. And then once you've done that, you're going to open that ST-Link software again, and you're going to do a full chip erase. So we're going to remove everything on both of these chips, okay? And once that is completed, again, that example is on my on-screen here. It's time to flash. So go to Memory and File Editing tab, and then you're going to open that catapult.bin file that we pulled off of our printer. And then we're going to press Start Programming, and then that will write that firmware to whichever you started with first. Once you have completed that, you can do a download. You will repeat that process for whichever one you didn't do first. So if you started with the motherboard, you'll do the toolhead next to follow the same steps to put that catapult.bin on there. We don't need the ST-Link any longer. So next up, we're actually going to do step 8, which is flashing Klipper firmware on the MCUs. So in order to do that, we're going to SSH into the printer. We're going to open the printer config. And then we need to look at the MCU and the extra MCU sections and then copy and paste the new device name that we got after we did our firmware updates. So there's a string of numbers that we're going to take, and then we're going to take that and copy it into the printer config. So open the GUI, go to printer config, and then now you're going to copy and paste that section of code for the main board first and then the toolhead second. Very similar to what we did earlier when we did the TTY naming convention that the SV08 uses in stock form. And then once you have that, that is going to allow your printer to now communicate properly. So if you're having trouble there, you can list and find the device. Those commands are in the instructions. So this process is relatively simple. It's just a copy and paste. Again, make sure that you have the right one for the motherboard and then the right one for your tool head as well. Moving on, there is step 3 in those instructions, and what we're doing there is it's an automatic MCU script update. So we're going to copy that into our Klipper folder on our printer, and then we need to edit that, and the reason why is because we need to tell it what to flash. So you're going to use that same device address that we copied into our printer config. And it will show you there will be a bunch of X's for MCU, which is the serial ID, and then Y's for the extra MCU, which is your tool head. So you'll copy those out of your printer config, and you will paste them in the update script that we have loaded via SSH, back into the printer. And then once you do that, you can run through, and that script will run. You have to change permissions on your script, so that command is also in there. You have to make it executable. So that's step 6 in those instructions. But you'll run this similar to how you ran the Kaya script earlier. Again, the commands are listed here. And when you run that, you're going to run through and select a few variables that you need to do. And it's going to flash the firmware, your Klipper firmware on your MCU, and then you will do the same for your tool head. And once you've done that, you can restart your printer, and then we now have a fully functional input shaping Klipper based Mainline Klipper SV08. So we are ready to start test printing at this point. What you need to do first when you fire it up is do a probe calibrate, which is your Z offset calibration. We need to get that redialed in because this will be basically a new printer at this point. And then once you've done that, run a couple of test prints and make sure everything's operating properly. What I like to do is I will turn on the tool head. So I would turn the nozzle temperature up, make sure that's working properly. Then I will do bed temperature, make sure that turns on and off. And then I will do that probe calibrate, get my offset dialed in, and get everything ready to print at that point. Load the filament, and then do a test print. And you can print whatever you want. You can go all in if you want to. You can do a benchy, first layer test, whatever you want to do at this point, you should be able to do it. We should have a fully functional printer, and you should see some improvements pretty much right away. I did, even with the probe. Now the real reason why we're doing Klipper overall is because we will be upgrading this to the Eddy coil. We're going to use an Eddy USB, and Mainline Klipper now supports that, so you no longer have to use the big Tree Tech fork of Klipper to use an Eddy coil. So we're going to do a video on that one next, and we'll really get this printer dialed in and see where we're at. So that kind of concludes the Klipper install. Questions, anything, put them in the comments. I'm here to help you. We'll walk through whatever step you're on, whatever you have questions on, and we will get you up and running. So make sure you do that. Let me know what you think of the video. Hopefully it's helpful. That's what I aim to do in every video, is help you guys. So like I said, comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Looking forward to hearing from you guys.